Anyway, before we get too far away from the Israel-Palestine, because we started talking about more domestic stuff, and we do have one bit of domestic news about Trump, which is interesting. I want to just quickly bring out, we would be remiss if we did not mention that more mass graves were discovered in Gaza, particularly at the Nasser Hospital and the Al-Shifa Hospital. I think, I believe I'm pronouncing that right, Nasser. Let me just double check here. Yeah, the Nasser Medical Complex in southern Gaza of Khan Yunis, which we've talked about before because that was where some of the heavy stuff was going on. And we've also talked about Al-Shifa Hospital because that was the hospital that we've now mentioned in two separate episodes. The first that was like raided by those fake doctors, and the second when they totally demolished it.
And there was Al-Ahli Hospital, which I think was the very first hospital they bombed.
Oh, okay. Well, what we're finding now is, in particular at Nasser, the hospital, they've discovered a mass grave with, originally it was supposed to be like, I think they had said something like 200 something bodies, but now that number's pushing 400, I think, bodies that they've discovered buried. A lot of them have been stripped naked, and a lot of them have been like zip tied with their hands behind their back. So this is definitely just like this is just like ethnic cleansing mass graves. We've seen this in like Bosnia, we've seen this in Rwanda. Maybe not so much Rwanda, but like these are like, there's literally nothing to say about this except for it's
disgusting.
Yeah,
it's fucking disgusting.
And I will say, for what it's worth, the UN now is officially like well on board. Like independent people need to get stepped in there to investigate like these are genocidal acts and yada yada yada. And the UN is officially like kind of ramping up their support of. I don't know what you'd call it, but you know what I mean. They're like, okay, no, this is genocide. It has to be stopped. Something has to be done before it keeps going.
It reminds me of like Srebrenica. It's like with like this basically like in like a week, basically there was 9,000 boys and men killed, and they're basically the same thing. They're just shot and then thrown in a grave.
And I saw a really good point recently, which was that the number is kind of stagnant as dead. Like the numbers of being reported was like, it was going up pretty consistently. It was 10,000, 15,000, 20,000, 30, and it's been 35, 40,000 for a while. And I was like, oh, I wonder what's going on. And like, I didn't really trust that number. And then I saw some take on somewhere on social media, and it said like, the number is not staying the same. Anybody who was counting has been killed. So like anybody in Gaza that was counting the number of dead, they're dead now. So that's why the number's not really going up anymore, because no one is left alive to count the number of dead. And I thought that was a really kind of like poignant and very, depressing and kind of eye-opening fact that, that's probably correct. Is like any institution like these hospitals or these medical complexes that were kind of keeping tally, any kind of internal ministry that was keeping tally of the dead in Gaza, they don't exist anymore. The doctors have been murdered. So like nobody's actually counting these bodies. So like, the number still says 35, 40,000. That is obviously way higher. Just nobody's counting anymore. Yeah.
And you have to remember, it's like a lot of the humanitarian aid groups and organizations don't want to come in anymore. Because like what we talked about a few episodes ago.
The World Kitchen Center?
Yeah. A few episodes ago, we talked about the World Kitchen Center and their fucking car. Like these people just came to offer food to hungry people, and they got fucking bombed. Like they've got missiles shot into multiple cars. So as volunteers, who wants to risk their life unless they're insanely dedicated to the Gazan people?
I mean, and that's partly, intentional by Israel, right? If you target the aid workers will stop coming. If you target the journalists, there will be nobody to report it. And then you can just kind of indiscriminately commit your genocide with nobody there.
Just the fact that like this is like in history, this is like the biggest amount of deaths of journalists.
Yeah, it's also the most like televised genocide, and it's just that's the part that's like it's like this disconnect of like it's very surreal sometimes, because it's like it's very obviously a genocide, and then we have like the biggest gaslighting campaign in history, where like major news outlets won't even refer to it as a genocide, and are still saying like this conflict where Israel's trying to root out Hamas, and it's like that hasn't been true since the first week. If it was ever true, it is now indiscriminate, like mask off genocide, indiscriminate killing of women, children, mass graves, zip tied bodies, like people stripped. Like at what point, show me where on the map this is about trying to find Hamas. And newspapers are still refusing to call it for what it is. And that's the UN is starting to.
Well, even journalists
a dollar short and a dollar late, but
like even journalists outside of the U.S. Like I don't know if you saw just recently, Hassan went on Piers Morgan. right? The uncensored one.
No, I mean, I saw him when it was like a month ago or 2 months ago, whenever that last one was.
Just now.
Oh, I didn't see that.
And he had like, there's a few like people in the panel there with him, and they're all pro-Israel. Besides one like conservative black woman who was actually pro-Palestine.
Okay.
But they were all just attacking him, and he literally couldn't get a word in. And when he started talking halfway through his like explanation, they would ask him another question, just bombard him. And what was disgusting is like they kept talking about Hamas, October 7th. And he's like, oh, you have to condemn this. You have to condemn this. He's like, what happened was atrocity. No civilian should be killed, blah, blah, blah. But then when they started talking about what about 40,000 people that were innocently massacred, you're talking about 1,000 people, 1,500. That's still not a good number.
Which again, Israel killed the majority of those.
Yes,
or a lot of them.
A lot. It has been already proven that Israel actually went and open fired on a lot of their own people, not knowing whether it was.
Yeah, I mean, and if you didn't know that, we should probably elaborate because that's the second time we've mentioned it. That 1,200 reported dead on the first October 7th attack. We now know from like, I think it was like helicopter footage and stuff from the Israeli military that a lot of those 1,200 deaths came from Israel, like just friendly fire.
Yeah, because the helicopter was just indiscriminately shooting.
Yeah.
And it happened to hit a couple of Israelis. Well, that couple turns out to be a lot more than a couple.
Yeah.
But that's besides the point. Even if there was 30, innocent people killed, it's wrong, right? It's wrong. But we're talking about like at the low number, at the conservative point, 40,000 to 45,000 people dead. 45,000. Nobody talks about how that's an atrocity on like mainstream media. This guy, they're on there. He's just trying to point that out, and they just keep bringing it back to Hamas. And I'm like, dude, like, what are you talking about? Like, are you out of your mind? Like, you sound like a psychopath.
That's what I was mentioning with Mike Johnson, talking about like, we have a Jewish student who just doesn't feel safe, and so we have to like, and it's like, but what about the children in Gaza that don't feel safe? And it's like this insane amount of like gaslighting. Yeah, it's just this wild surrealism of like we all live in this alternate reality where there's just not 40,000 dead. And then this is a recent story of like there's some footage come out of Gazans like on a beach. And have you seen this where they're washing on a beach? There's a beach in western, like along the coast in Gaza.
Yeah.
And it's been all over Israeli TV footage. They're all foaming at the mouth that Gazans have the audacity to like play at the beach. And it said like the reporter that I saw on the Israeli, or the talking head, I wouldn't call him a reporter, the talking head I saw on the Israeli news channel that it was in subtitles because it was in Hebrew. He was talking about like all of these people deserve to die. They're all rats and need to be exterminated or whatever. And it was just because like they largely live in tents. They live in tent cities, and the only kind of access to water they have is the ocean. So a lot of them are using the ocean for like cleaning, for hygiene, bathing, as well as like children are kind of just playing because they've been under constant threat of death for a while, and they're just kind of
over it.
They're allowed to just hang out at the beach, and like that, like I guess like that, the image of like Gazans playing at a beach, just like it whipped the Israelis into a frenzy of like they're not allowed to play, like they're you see they're not being massacred, they're at the beach, and it was just like all of these really bad takes. And if I can find that video, I saw it on Instagram, the clip of the Israeli news show. And to be fair, I don't want to like totally like throw every Israeli person in that camp. Obviously not, but also like that could have been like the Alex Jones of Israel. I have no context for that guy, but he was saying really heinous shit. So like, and it was on Israeli TV. So I kind of just made the connection, but I should back up and say that could have been like the Israeli Alex Jones.
But then you also have like polls and stuff that come out of Israel, and like 85%, 90% of people are like pro what's happening.
And the reason I'm not super. The reason I don't feel super bad about saying that is because remember, like the defense minister of Israel, like all of the different politicians in Israel that all said the same thing, that they need to be exterminated.
Yeah.
Was it Marco Rubio said that? Like, or was he referring to somebody else?
Marco Rubio was confirming the Palestinians.
Yeah. So like,
correct.
It's not a stretch to think that some random Israeli talking head would also say that, because like they've gone on. Netanyahu has said that.
Well, have you seen like footage of like Christians and Muslims like walking through like parts of Israel, and there's kids just spitting on them?
Yeah.
Like they would throw rocks and spit on people that are just not Jewish. Yeah. Like they have nothing to do with anything. And I remember when it was a Christian journalist. She's a white lady, Christian journalist. And she literally couldn't walk through the town without having kids coming and just punching her and spitting on her and throwing rocks at her. Like,
yeah, it's insane. And need I remind you that after 9/11, the first man that was killed was a Sikh because he was wearing a turban, and they just assumed he was Muslim, so he was beaten to death and I think stabbed.
If that's how they treat a white Christian woman, how do you think they treat a Palestinian Muslim?
Yeah,
or a Palestinian Christian? Yeah,
I guess. Yeah, what I was mentioning is a little. I guess I didn't see your point, but yeah, that's what you're saying.
These like what they're teaching to these children, like these children don't know. They know what they're told, that these people are devils, that they want to kill you, they want to kill your family,
just hatred,
all this shit,
absolute hatred.
It's like it just kind of shows you what Israeli society is like, and I'm sure there are certain parts of Israel where people are a little bit more civilized.
Well, we know that, yeah, we know that's true because we know that there are a lot of like the Jewish Voice for Peace groups that are in American college campuses. We know that some of those similar groups are operating in Israel, but I think a lot of those people have been beaten and like imprisoned.
Yeah,
and I know that there was some pretty horrible
called
stories
anti-Semitic.
Called anti-Semitic.
It's called anti-Semitic.
That comes back to like the whole self-hating Jewish thing. So.